Hello once again, witchy people. So today I wanted to talk Ostara, the vernal equinox, or even Easter, and sort of like look at some of the history of it, but more the history of Easter and Passover, and maybe some of the things that I might or might not do, depending on how I feel. Like I said, at the moment it's a really weird time, I feel, to be a practicing witch, because there is no normality at the moment. We have to try and find out what this normal is going to be when everything is settled, and until then it's a bit up in the air. So anyway, and yes, I do have my notes, so I will be looking down. And I even dressed for the occasion. It's got a hood and everything. Maybe I'll just use this as my Sabbaths dress every time I talk about Sabbaths. Anyway, don't want to hear about my dress. You want to hear about Easter, Ostara, vernal equinox. So, in the late 7th to early 8th century, there was a rather well-known and respected monk called the Venerable Bede. And he first used the word Easter in a writing, and he got the word apparently from the ancient goddess. Now, whether this goddess was English, ancient English, or Germanic, there is some debate on it, but possibly ancient English goddess called Ostara, or Istra, as some people like to say. And because of that, maybe it should be more traditional for Christians to call it Passover rather than Easter, which is from the Jewish tradition. Passover is possibly the most, I think it's called Pascha in Greek, it's possibly the most important seasonal festival in the Jewish year. And it's a time when the liberation of the Jews from the Egyptians is celebrated. Now, Christianity came about because, like I said, this is just a really lightweight version. So, one Passover, Jesus travelled to Jerusalem with a lot of his followers and created such a disturbance that it really brought the attention of the Romans to him, and that kind of, he basically made a bit of a ruckus in the Jerusalem temple, celebrating Passover, a Jewish festival. And the Romans were slightly incensed by this, and the Romans were like the dominant power at the time over the Jewish peoples. Anyway, so he created this ruckus, and the Romans didn't like it, so they arrested him, and that brought about him being crucified. So he was executed, and that was about in 30 AD. A few days after his death, a few of his disciples thought that they saw him alive again, and they went to check his tomb, and his tomb was empty. And that was on the Sunday after he was executed. This kind of all happened during Passover, the Jewish festival of Passover. So it only seemed natural to sort of like club them all together, sort of the resurrection of Christ and Passover, and celebrate these events together, which is why they're celebrated at that time of year. And like I said, thus the birth of Christianity and the Christian religion, it was born. But still with the acceptance from most Christians, even at the time and even now, that the roots are firmly placed within Judaism and the Jewish festival of Passover. And as I said, most Christians prefer to celebrate this on a Sunday, because it was a Sunday where the empty tomb was found. So, with that, let's go back to pre-Judaism and talk about the pagan roots of it. So obviously Passover is how Easter came about, but it was still based rather a lot on pagan customs and pagan traditions. So Easter, or Ostara, was the goddess of the dawn, but not necessarily the dawn of the day, but the dawning of the fertile, fruitful season. So Ostara is a pagan-based Sabbath. Whether you call it Easter or Ostara, using the word, it's a pagan-based, or I believe, for me, it's a pagan-based festival. And the date changes each year, Easter dates change each year, and this is where it gets a bit in-depth, because it is a seasonal celebration. So, and because it's a seasonal thing, and it's pagan, it's done on the cycle of the moon. So Easter happens, it's assigned to the first Sunday after the first full moon following the spring vernal equinox. So as I said, that's where its pagan roots lie. And obviously it's a time when the day and night are of equal length. Only happens twice, which usually therefore makes it a fire festival, because you're celebrating light and dark. This time of year I think it's very important, because not only are you celebrating equal amounts of light and dark, but you're also celebrating the fact that it's the balancing point and the turning point of where you are going to get more light and less dark. So this time of year, I suppose most pagans, certainly myself, it's a celebration and a time of balance and fertility, welcoming the end of winter, and celebrating the fact that we all survived winter, and now is the time that we can start being productive again. So it's a celebration of new life, not just the normal birth of animals, but for trees and plants and, like I said, fertility and growth. So going back in history once again, early Americans, namely the New England Puritans, wouldn't actually celebrate Easter because they judged it too tainted by pagan or paganistic and heathen roots. Apart from that, Easter, like Christmas, was a festival that kind of gave an excuse for a bit of a drink and a bit of a party. So the Puritans didn't like that very much. Now, apart from the whole drinking stuff, because obviously, and I do think that thing is, I think not just pagan but Jewish festivals are very similar. Any excuse for a drink, pagans and Jews were very much similar like that, I think. Anyway, so the whole egg and bunny thing. Now, that came, I think, from medieval times. So egg, obviously, it's an obvious symbol of life, new beginnings, and fertility, as are rabbits. Though, back in medieval times, certainly it wasn't rabbits. It was hares. Now, the ancient Germanic people used to, that the tradition was that the Easter hare bring decorated eggs to good children. And that kind of whole idea about Mad March hares and the Mad March hare bringing decorated eggs to good children, was supplanted by the idea of a bunny because bunnies could be domesticated and it was thought, better for children sort of thing. So as we sort of reach certainly the 19th century, sort of like 18th, 19th century, we're becoming, as people, more family orientated, and we include children in the celebrations. It wasn't just an excuse to go out and have imbibe a few bits of alcohol. It was also a time for a family time to get children involved. So it seemed natural to sort of like, it was no longer a hare, it was a bunny, because bunnies are cute, supposedly more cuter than hares, and are preferred by children. So even as a Christian celebration, Easter, once again, the roots are firmly placed in paganism, and the Puritans knew that. And pagan symbols are traditional in Easter as well as Ostara. Ostara, obviously, because it is a pagan festival. So, how do I celebrate? I think it kind of changes every year because it does depend on the weather and the seasons, but there are some things that if the weather's okay, you can do. Some people like to celebrate at midday because it's a middle point, the same as so you're balancing the day. Some people prefer to do it at dusk when you're balancing, day turning into night. Some people prefer midnight, some people prefer dawn. To do maybe a personal little ritual or something like that. So my thing is sometimes I have 2 candles, a black and a white candle for balance, but usually it's just a white candle. And I make a small circle, usually of stones, because I like it to represent the earth. Because I think it's a time when you need to become very regrounded, if you like. So it's nice to use stones. I sometimes use shells, nuts, seeds, as in anything that's okay to use outside. Stones tend to be quite abundant in my garden. So stones are easier to use. So you make a circle of stones. And then this is, and like I say, I do mine at dawn or early morning. It's as close to sunrise as I can. Usually it's really, really, really cold. So it's sort of like jumpers and welly boots because the grass is always wet. Anyway, so you light the candle while stood in the stone circle, because I think that's quite appropriate somehow. Preferably facing towards the rising sun, because you are honouring the fact that now the days are going to start getting longer. And for me, it's welcoming the dawn, welcoming the dawning, not just of the day, but of a new season. So I concentrate on the flame. This is bearing in mind if I can keep a candle alight. If not, it'll be one of those little electric candles, little battery-powered candles. But I think it's nice to consider your place. How do you fit in with nature, with the earth, with, how do you fit into your life and the greater scheme of things? And in that way, how do you find balance? So balance in your life, in how do you find the balance between light and dark, between work and play, laughter and tears, everything? It's, really concentrate on thinking about how you balance everything in your life. Do you share your time and also find space to be alone? Do you have you got balance between your personal life and your working life? Do you have a balance between sharing your company and having your own company? All these things. And, like I said, at this time of year, you note the balance of day and night because it is a perfect split. And it is that, like I said, it's that balancing point before letting more light in. So it's a good time to celebrate letting more light into your life, as in letting more positivity in, and so you can grow your positivity. And the night's becoming shorter, so we have more daytime to be productive. And for me, it's about accepting harmony and balance into everyday practices and trying to keep a balance. So there you go. That is very much how I would kind of think about on Ostara, the vernal equinox, how I think about it and the kind of things I like to do. So as I said, I like to use stones to represent the earth, because the earth is quite an important element in any kind of Ostara celebration for me, because it is about regrounding, reconnecting. For many pagans and witches, from what I can gather, snakes are also a great representation for this time of year. Mainly because it is this time of year where they start, if it's warm enough, they'll start to become more, they begin to awake, they become more active, and they bring themselves out to sun and to warm up in the sun. And they also shed their skins at this time of year. And that's kind of like a perfect example of a rebirth, shedding your skin and starting anew. Signs of growth and an awakening. I think an awakening is a good way of putting it. So having eggs, obviously for a lot of people, is also another way. Eggs are a great symbol of Ostara. And quite a lot of people will use eggs within rituals and a lot of food. I do believe that's quite common. So what happens if, for instance, like my daughter, you're a vegan? That kind of puts a different spin on it, because obviously there's so many things that vegans would rather not partake in. So I think for vegans, if you or even if you have an allergy to eggs, things like that, instead of using eggs in your food, you could try adding seeds. So edible seeds and nuts, but edible seeds especially, things like poppy seeds and sesame seeds are really good. So you could sort of like sprinkle them on top of your meal as an alternative to having eggs in your meal. And the seeds will represent fertility in much the same way the eggs will, because obviously seeds, you plant, you grow. So there you go. I think that's it. That's, for me, that's Ostara this year. I'm not going to say next year it's going to be the same. And last year certainly wasn't the same. But for this year, this is how I feel about Ostara, and probably how I will be celebrating, unless it's absolutely tipping it down outside, and then I'll have to think of something else. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening, witchy people. I'll be back very soon. Bye for now.